an outsider going into a huge corporate environment has a lot to offer.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Coming Clean Podcast. This is your host, Peter O. Estevez. Welcome and good day to you and to all. Hello, James Sommerville. James Sommerville is a creative, an incredible man. He's a man of the hour. He's actually, I actually met James Sommerville, the former global design consultant, senior, or I'm gonna retrieve. I'm gonna stop. I didn't like that intro. My apologies.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Coming Clean Podcast. This is your host, Peter O. Estevez. Good day and good opportunity to be on a new podcast with none other than Mr. James Sommerville. James Sommerville is a former VP of Global Designs for Coca-Cola. And now he is a co-founder or the founder of Known Unꓘnown, a creative agency that is disruptive and ready to make some changes across the world. Hello, James, and welcome to Coming Clean Podcast.
Peter, hello. This is great. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, you've been the man of the hour. I had an opportunity to listen to you in Clubhouse, and I was really intrigued by a lot of your background, what you do and how you do it, more importantly, but where you came from. You know, a young man at the age of 19 that was granted a 2,000-pound grant from the prince. Tell us a little bit about the beginning, where you started, and how did you end up to becoming the VP of one of the leading world's companies, Coca-Cola?
Thank you. Yes. Well, my journey did start probably at school. I was not that academic, but I had an artistic flair. So I think I was pushed towards an art school program. In the early 80s, I completed that in a graphic design was the course. So that was, and then as I came out of art school, there was a high unemployment in the UK in the mid 80s. Young people were not really jumping onto, a career path too soon. And I was a street artist. So I was chalking on the streets of the cities around the UK. I did that for like 3 years, and people come and maybe throw a few coins in your hat, and so I felt that it was time to come inside. It was time to maybe come. What the British weather's like, so it was time to maybe come undercover. And I with a friend, I founded an agency in my grandmother's attic bedroom, which was our first studio. And we called it ATTIK, and that was almost launched our entrepreneurial journey at that particular point. Maybe not through choice, but just through circumstances.
Even the name is artistic, ATTIK, okay? But the spelling is actually a little bit different. I loved it. I love the way you spelled it, ATTIK. So what happened from there? What happened with that agency? How did you grow up to becoming the behemoth behind the rebranding of Coca-Cola?
Well, I think when we started ATTIK, an interesting point behind the name, spelling it with a K, because we had to draw the logo by hand. And our C's were not very kind of perfect. So we used a ruler and we decided to spell it with a K. So, there's a story behind every name, right? And that was ours. And I think it was a stopgap. We honestly felt maybe 2 years, we would then get, a real job. We would just use it as a way to try and earn a little bit of income whilst the unemployment was so high. It lasted 25 years, and the journey for us was took us all around the world, many global clients, great teams that we built, great clients that we worked for. And it really started to sort of, unfold in a way that we would never have imagined in the very beginning. But we were young, naive, not too many overheads, and we had nothing to lose. We just wanted to think big, and big ambitions. That was the goal that propelled us, really.
That's very interesting. Something that you say, your choice of words. You said we thought we would do this until we get a real job, and that was a lot of the mentality of the artist, the creative, right? But today, that's not the role of the creative. How important is the creative today, design, and how much influence does that design have in our culture today?
Well, I've seen, in my almost 40 years now of really being part of the design industry, a huge shift in the definition of design. So not just trends and how we may look at design from an aesthetic perspective, but when I started, designers came in at the end of a process. They came in at the end to just make things look nice. The beginning of the process was very strategic, very much about kind of creating a business case for a product, a marketing strategy, brand strategy, and then the designer. I found now over the last 10 years, certainly the last 5 years, the designer has moved all the way up the food chain. They're involved in the ideation of the product, the strategic positioning of a brand, if you like. And of course, at the end, they'll do the aesthetic as well. So the role of a designer has expanded from just the visualization of something and making it look nice, which we all appreciate, to being what I would call not just a pair of hands, but also a brain now that's involved in the entire development of a brand or a product.
Very interesting. Not just the pair of hands, but the brain as well. Very interesting analogy. Why is that the case, though, James? Is it because we are bombarded with 60 billion bytes of information every single day? Is it because design helps us integrate ourselves with the product that we are consuming? Or what's the importance of design being so important, okay, in the everyday life of the product creation and the integration of the consumer?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think designers have a kind of a common personality trait. They usually have a great amount of empathy, thinking about their design at the end. But in a customer experience world now, understanding that customer from the very beginning is somehow why I think designers have been pulled down the funnel, because their empathetic skills are very strong. And so from a strategic standpoint, from a product development standpoint, those are areas where empathy is important, really understanding the mindset of the consumer and how this will play a role in their life. So designers have got those core skills, and I think that's one of the reasons why they also can ideate very quickly. They can scribble things out. So in a world now of design thinkers, where we need to move with agility and iterate version 1, version 2, version 3. Designers are very good at kind of conceptualizing things very, very quickly. The goal may not be perfection. And so it's kind of like that's another reason why designers have been sort of introduced to project development at a much earlier stage.
How is that different from where, your former employer, where you played a major role with Coca-Cola and rebranding the company? How's that any different from the white panda bears that they used to, the Santa Claus, the Coke is It commercials, the reindeer, all that animation that was created into Coca-Cola that really targeted a wild blanket of the marketplace, right? The demographics was everybody. In fact, I have heard you say that the demographic was from 12 to 112, which is, it was basically a nest of a sea of people, right? We went for everybody, but it was so very strategically done. It was like there was an opportunity for a commercial or some type of marketing for every particular season, and we could never forget about Coca-Cola. It was there at Christmas, it was there in summer, it was there at festivities, it was there in every occasion. How is that different from design today?
I think with a brand like Coca-Cola and their 130 years of, fantastic marketing, how do you continue that journey? How do you continue to tell that story? They're great storytellers. And whether you are 18 or 85, we still love great stories. And so I think the demographic of a 12 to 112, the sweet spot, the target really would be more around teenagers and young adults. And the reason for that is because if you're 13 and 14, you're kind of looking up to the 19-year-old and thinking, that's a cool group. I want to be part of that. And if you're in my demographic, if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you remember when you were a young adult and a teenager and hanging out with our friends. So we have a great memory of those moments. And Coke has just been fantastic through its entire journey of, certainly in the last 50 or more years, of reflecting those everyday authentic moments that we all love, whether it's with our families, our friends, our loved ones. And I think they kind of like, they're very good at kind of like reaching the masses by telling the truth, telling those authentic stories, and triggering those memories and making us feel emotionally connected to the brand, and then physically connected to the great product. Of course, the great taste of Coke is without doubt, we cannot ignore that, but their marketing and storytelling adds to that great taste.
What is the challenge today with a company, not just Coca-Cola, but I'm going to use Coca-Cola as an example. Yes, you mentioned the great taste, an incredible drink that went with everything. Went with the taco, went with the sandwich, it went with the gyro. It appealed to the ethnicity of every food of every culture across the world. But how do you deal with rebranding a company that today, the soda pop is not as popular? People have become more health conscious. People are conscious about diabetes. People are conscious about sugar levels. People are conscious about the intake of what they drink. How do you rebrand a company like that without affecting its bottom line? Or is it possible to do that?
Certainly, I'm also a consumer as well as a designer. Our trends, our habits have changed over the last 10 years, maybe more. But I think also the Coca-Cola Company also has a beverage for every point of the day, whether that's the dairy in your cereal or coffee, indeed the coffee, through to lunchtime. I think it's okay to have a soda at lunchtime if that's the way, or take a water, all the way through to an evening cocktail, with the tonic water. So as an organization, they're really about hydration. And of course, Coca-Cola is the jewel in the crown. But really, I think, everything in moderation. I still enjoy a Coca-Cola. Maybe not 6, 7, 8 a day. That wouldn't make sense in the lifestyle I like to live. But the company reflects that, and I think the portfolio reflects that. And they're very, my role as the designer was to really kind of like bring the storytelling and the identity to many of those other brands in the portfolio as well.
With such a corporate structure of Coca-Cola, such of what's royal structure of Coca-Cola, it's an old school institution. Was there any challenge in bringing new ideas into the boardroom and getting them to change from the traditional long-standing of 100+ years that had gotten them to become who they are today?
I think so. I think when I first arrived at Coke, I was extremely nervous. I had imposter syndrome. I didn't think I was worthy of being in such a great cathedral. And the fact that I was leading global design was pressure, but also excitement on my side. I mentioned when I founded my agency, ATTIK, we wanted to think big. Actually, what I did when I arrived at Coke was flip the script. They're already big. I said, let's think small. Let's move like a small company. Let's think more entrepreneurial to my team. And that actually started to kind of, work for us and ripple through maybe some of the system. And it was timely because people then would start to think about design thinking and moving at a much faster pace to bring product to market. So an outsider, and I would say this to anybody, an outsider going into a huge corporate environment has a lot to offer, because we've been wired differently. And I think organizations of scale today need that level of entrepreneurship, that level of outside thinking, in order for them to adapt and find new habits in terms of their process. And they embrace that. Coke was a great organization for trying new things. So I think my greatest achievement won't be necessarily seen on a can or a bottle. It's the way that we worked as a team that I was most proud of when I left.
I love that, and I want to touch on the imposter syndrome a bit. But to your point of the impact an outsider can make in an organization, we see it every day now, right? We see the collaborations between artists and major brands, Nike and name it, right? We see those collaborations and how they can see the power, the influence of a single individual to work. Perhaps the old school mentality of corporate dictatorship will not allow that type of mindset thinking, right? And today we're open to opportunities for collaboration. It's a completely different world. And I think each and every single one of us are transitioning to be better thinkers and also better adopters of new ideas. Now, James, it's something you touched on because I think it's important to dive on it a little bit. You say you felt like an imposter in that environment. You certainly had many accolades. You know, you have also worked with Virgin, you worked with Adidas, so you've been around major brands. Why was it that you felt that type of the imposter syndrome with Coca-Cola and not elsewhere?
Yeah, I think if I look back, I think it was just you know, this daunting experience of walking into an incredibly intelligent, strategic. Many of my client relationships, of course, I wasn't part of the client team. I was an agency, so I would dip in, do some work, and then leave the building. Being part of that, you know, I wondered if I'd had the right formal education, formal strategic education in branding. Versus my scrappy agency life, which was very different. So I felt like a fish out of water for maybe a week. And then I realized that actually, you know, as I mentioned, we can bring a lot to these. And I was embraced for my differences rather than they don't need to hire the same people. They need to hire people who are different and it's complementary. So in the same way that you mentioned a collab, I was almost collabing with the organization internally. You know, not as a public-facing product, but certainly just kind of like great organizations, big organizations, however large they are, they're just so fantastic. The successful ones are at kind of creating this environment where it's okay to be small. It's okay, I think, in a world today, it's good to be small. Small steps. We used to, a decade ago or 20 years ago, we'd beat our chest on how big we are, how many employees we have, what's our revenue or our global footprint. I think today small is beautiful and actually helps you kind of like, you know, work in a large organization. But that was something that they embraced and something that I was pleased to be part of that environment.
Very interesting. I'm gonna touch on something again. Very interesting. You say it's okay to be small in such a fast world, right? Because the world is moving at a speed of lightning. And quoting you from other interviews, you said 4 years of today are 2 decades of our parents or our previous generations timelines, right? You know, at the speed that things change so rapidly, in 4 years everything changes. But yet, being small or pulling back and working from a more constrained environment, what gives us an opportunity to be able to develop our own creative ideas, our own pace, our own, be able to have a completely different vision than from being in the mass and the mess of all the chaos, right? How is that impacting us today through this, to the times of COVID, to the times of Corona? And how is both the creative world, the design world, and the working space is going to change from that?
Yeah, I think if I relay that to the small story, I think micro connections, and that could just be a double tap in Instagram. It could be a like. Somebody sees your like, somebody checks your work out. There's a relationship. I think Clubhouse is a great example of that. You know, these kind of these small conversations that turn into now relationships. And so from that small, from those acorns, can grow oak trees in terms of relationships. So a simple like and a repost feels very small in the huge kind of content world that we live in right now. But that can also, from an entrepreneurial and someone growing their personal brand, can actually start to put them in a position of developing a relationship. That relationship can blossom. That relationship can turn into something, I guess, financially motivated, growth, business exchange, or just a great relationship where people help each other in smaller ways. So I think yes, brands can do that, small steps, but I also think individuals are doing that in our everyday social interactions and what we see and how we're connecting.
Besides showing up and being interactive in social media and doing the likes and making the comments and showing up to Clubhouse and Facebook and Instagram, what is it that we can do as individuals, or the solo entrepreneur, or the entrepreneur can do in order to have greater visibility and greater impact in a world that is so connected today?
When I left Coca-Cola, one of the things, I didn't have a business plan then, I just needed some time out, but one of the things I said to myself is, now I'm out of maybe I'm closing a chapter. I want to meet in the next 365 days, 365 people who I didn't know at Coca-Cola. So I forced myself to interact with new communities, check in with organizations, and so that for me was an opportunity to build new relationships that can lead to new stories. I actually find now, Peter, that I do that every year. In the first year, it probably took me a year. By year 3 now, I can meet 365 people in a month. So that idea of things moving faster, but they're all individual, they're on a personal level. Coca-Cola, we had a great saying at Coca-Cola, mass intimacy. And the reason that juxtaposes is when you enjoy a Coke, when it's in that perfect serve, that glass bottle, perfect temperature, there's nothing more intimate than actually, putting that to your lips. That's a very intimate moment. But of course, Coca-Cola would like to sell 1 billion a day.
Absolutely.
So this idea of at scale, but actually when you're in the moment, it can feel very, very personal and very, very small, very micro, but actually very fulfilling as well. So I kind of go about my day a little bit like that as well, meeting people one-on-one, but also at the same time thinking about that scale and that reach.
I love that, mass intimacy. Tell us about Known Unꓘnown, your current project, the new company you founded.
Yeah, so I think when it went before Coca-Cola, I was always chasing clients and pitching and trying to kind of like survive as an agency, ATTIK. And then I was on the client side, so I was on the opposite side of the table. I was seeing agencies come through, and great agencies, small, medium, large, but I was viewing them through my previous lens. I refer to myself as I was a poacher turned gamekeeper. And I was observing the agency model. That was really also what I was doing, looking at their work and partnering. I was also looking at the model. I was also realizing that model was really not changing. Whether you were small, medium, or large, it's like a 50, 60, 75-year-old model. So when I left Coca-Cola, I founded this project called Known Unꓘnown. And that was a wholly distributed creative platform. So not brick and mortar, not 100 people in an agency in New York or London or anywhere else in the world, San Francisco, from all corners of the world. And so for me, it was an experiment. It really, quite honestly, didn't really exist. It's not crowdsourcing. It's really about finding the best talent in the world and bringing them into a community to work on real projects. And then, of course, along comes COVID and everybody is distributed. So it's made it much easier to think about that. But the name Known Unꓘnown for me is everybody has something that they know and can share. And because we're all lifelong learners, everybody is looking for something that maybe other people can teach us. So that we all have known and unknown embedded in us every day. So I think this idea of creating a community where some people over there can help this person here and vice versa. My oldest is in his 80s. My youngest in the network is 18. So you have that kind of like generational shift as well, and how they can both help each other. So that's the theory. And really building out the Known Unꓘnown community is really my third chapter, if you like, after ATTIK, the agency, Coca-Cola, the giant, and now thinking about really how can I connect great creators all over the world.
I love that. I love that. And let me tell you why, because I'm a firm believer. I'm working on an experiment currently on a particular project. But how do we merge? It seems like we in limbo with a couple of generations, the Gen Xers and millennials, and then we have the baby boomers. And there's almost like a complete disconnect between the generations. There's a mass of baby boomers that don't have the automation knowledge, the systems that the younger generation has. You know, the technology savvy, the navigating the technology. And there's a tremendous vacuum in between. And I've always thought it would be an interesting project to be able to create that bridge that brings them together and becomes a conversation piece that allows the younger generations to integrate their technological experiences with the older generation that maybe it doesn't even have a succession system because they don't have automation systems in place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as marketeers, as organizations, we like to slice the demographic, right? So whether the baby boomers or millennials or Gen X, I actually think it's the generation we. And it's not driven through age. It's not driven through the year or the period that we were all born in. Of course, we have clearly had different influences as we were teenagers and young adults and adults. And that could be technology, that could be the way that we interact. But in a we generation, you could actually, the conversation, one shoot that I never quite got around to this shoot for timing, but I wanted to do a Coca-Cola shoot with, say, 2 or 3 teenagers at the table or in somewhere out of home, and 3 or 4 grandparents, and that kind of everybody can connect over a Coke. They can tell stories when they were young, and these cool kids can teach them and inform them what's the latest social media. So that exchange, that social exchange, I think is so valuable both ways. Certain brands could do that, but aside from that, I just think that seems to be the decade that we're moving into, not driven through age and maybe when we were born or where we were born, but really just about helping and connecting people of all ages.
Well, I think Clubhouse somehow does that, right? Because there's no other than be able to curate your own room, other than to be able to be validated by how you converse, right? By your voice, by your the way that you communicate. I think it gives us an opportunity to be able to sit in rooms. Gosh, you and I sat in the same room. You were in a Q&A about your long history with Coca-Cola, something that in a typical corporate world that would have never happened. That was a mastermind that would have cost thousands of dollars, right? And we see that with Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or many other thought leaders that Damon John or many of the other thought leaders that come into those rooms. I curate rooms. I curated one with Mark Randolph, the co-founder of Netflix, who I had on the podcast, who's a friend, but those opportunities were not given to us before. And you're right, we are able to mix the generations. And I love your terminology, generation we, right? It's a great word. It's a way of putting that into context. James, what was your greatest impact that you believe that you make at Coca-Cola?
Well, I think we often talk about, I remember the expression, the what's and the how's. The what's would be maybe something that I designed. Maybe created that was in the public domain. I remember doing a particular Coca-Cola can for Australia, actually. Australia in 2017, I think, was going to vote as a nation for same-sex marriage. And many brands came out to support that. Coca-Cola came out, and we wanted to write the word love on a can. And so it was the first time I sketched out the LOVE, the word love, in the Coca-Cola script, the famous logo, the famous Spencerian script.
Right.
The legal team, it's never been used for another word other than Coca-Cola. So I lobbied with our legal counsel and the brand team, and they eventually kind of signed off on that. And one of the things so I was very proud of that for the initiative in Australia. Then it became a global can and a globally produced piece of packaging because it's universal. It also reflected the brand's core values. That's not a trend word that will be out of fashion in 10 years or 100 years. Love is at the heart of everything that we do. So it's a timeless word on a timeless brand. So I was very proud of that in terms of the what's and many other pieces of packaging. But I was also proud of the how's, how we worked differently from the day I arrived to the day I departed. It was a very different design team. And so that will never be seen on a shelf or in a cooler, a piece of packaging. but it will be seen internally by myself and my ex-colleagues as just moving the needle on how internally you work in a large organization. So for me, I dissect it into many, many what's, some great designs out there, and also some how did we do it, how did we work together, and how did we change.
Besides Known Unꓘnown, the company you recently founded, what's next for James Sommerville?
Well, I think I'm also very connected to my, I have to say thank you to the Prince's Trust. The Prince's Trust, they're a charity in the UK that really helped my first beginnings. They gave us £2,000 to launch our agency. And so we're part of the alumni. So I'm actually now helping the Prince's Trust and thinking about launching with them the Prince's Trust on an international level, specifically Prince's Trust America. So that's a very start of a new journey. They've helped over 1 million young people over the 40 years since His Royal Highness started the charity in the 1970s. So for me, I'm excited to give some time to that, to see whether we can take the Prince's Trust charity and help the next 1 million young people in all fields, not just creatives, in all entrepreneurial fields, allowing them. Another great expression from Coke, I remember someone saying, we're the 9th generation in charge of the brand. When I was there,
wow,
we have to get it ready for the 10th. And then the 11th and the 12th. So we're all passing through. So this idea of being able to sort of prepare for the next generation, I think is really important for me as a creative, but also through this work with the Prince's Trust, all young people throughout the world need that help. And so that's something that I'll also be very passionate about, for the next decade or hopefully longer.
How can we help you? How can we help you spread your message, James?
Well, thank you. I think if people would like to connect with me on Known Unꓘnown, whether you are a brand, small, medium, large, we cater for the global brands or the startups. Find me through the usual channels of LinkedIn or Instagram, maybe even Clubhouse. If you are a creator, a creative, a photographer, an artist, an icon, a brand designer, also reach out. Join our community. We believe you can offer something to other people. And also we believe that maybe there's still an opportunity for us all to teach and you can learn from something as well. So if anybody would like to come and connect with us on Known Unꓘnown, I'd be thrilled, both as a brand or as a creative.
A legend in the design global world, Mr. James Sommerville. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. This has been great.